Okay, good.
Okay. All right. Good afternoon, directors. We've got confirmation of quorum. So I'll call the meeting to order for November the 18th. Can I have adoption of public meeting, please? Or meeting agenda.
So moved.
Director Wally. Second. Director Evans, thank you. Anything to add? Seeing none, all in favor? Sorry, opposed? Seeing none, call carried. Good afternoon, Associate Director Jules. We'll go on to petitions and delegations. At this time, I'd like to introduce Stephen Watson, Stakeholder Engagement Advisor for BC Hydro, to give his presentation on the Strathcona Dam water discharge upgrade. Mr. Watson, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Can everyone hear me?
Yep.
Good.
Everything's good.
I think there was going to be a presentation shared, Tom or Edith.
Yep.
Perfect.
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, Edith, you've got the control. So next slide, please. So yeah, I mean, the focus here is about the Strathcona Dam and some project work there, as well as the new campground. But of course, it's all part of the bigger system. So as there's a number of people on this video conference who are quite familiar with the system, others maybe not so much, but generally speaking, we have the 3 dams and jerry stations built in the 40s and 50s. We have the Strathcona Dam, the largest dam on Vancouver Island. It holds back water, about 80% of the water storage in the Campbell River system. And then below that, we have Lower Campbell.
Did we lose him?
Yeah, it sounds like he's in his car.
No, it's not. You still hear me? Or...
Yeah, now we can. Yeah, you're back.
Okay. No, I heard the car too, but it wasn't me.
Okay. If you're not speaking, please mute, directors, staff.
Okay. So yeah, the next slide, please. Yeah, so this is all about the, in terms of the capital projects that we have planned relate to seismic risk. So BC Hydro spent about 6 years and $10 million to better understand the potential seismic risk. And that was done, and there are 3 types of earthquakes. There's a surface earthquake, deep crustal earthquake, and of course the big one is a Cascadia subduction zone, kind of a magnitude 9 earthquake that hits about every 500 years. So we want these facilities, these 3 dams, to be able to withstand that type of earthquake and hold the water back. So that allowed us to have a better understanding of the ground motions, and so to have our dams be able to withstand that. So that's the goal of all 3 projects that we have. The Strathcona Dam and the John Hart Dam are a potential concern in terms of failure in the event of a major earthquake. The Lador Dam is a concrete dam found on bedrock, but we need to upgrade the spillway gates. So next slide. So as a number of you know, we've been working closely with the regional district and the city of Campbell River on the interim downstream risk until these facilities are upgraded till about 2028. And so this is the map that we generated between the 3 parties to advise the public. There's another more closer map for the city, kind of in the insert there. But the water direction actually goes in 2 directions, one through the city mostly, but also to the north, Mohan Creek. And so this, we've been communicating. I know Sean Koopman and others continue to educate the community on the interim risk, and the warning being, if it knocks you down, go to high ground. And so, yeah, it's important to keep this in the forefront until these dams are upgraded, and that's why we're doing it. Next slide. So this is the John Hart Dam. It's just over 800 meters long. And so we have the spillway gates releasing water for flood risk management. And then we have the low level water release valve for fish habitat flows and things like that. And then the intake below ground into the underground powerhouse downstream. So next slide. And this is just another view of the downstream view of the spillway gates and the low level outlet. On the top left there, you can see the City of Campbell River Water Treatment Building, which intakes directly into the John Hart Reservoir. Next slide. I'm not going to go into any details here, but basically it's going into the berms on the upstream and downstream side, and upgrades to the spillway gate hoist systems and the spillway gates. And basically this work looks to, our expectation is that it would then withstand a major earthquake. We have the city water intake, of course some of the regional district withdraw some of that too through an agreement, and we have silt curtains and other processes in place to protect water quality during construction. And the road across this dam will be closed for about 5 years, starting in 2023 during construction. Next slide. So upstream of that is the Lador Dam with the 3 spillway gates, and as I mentioned, it's concrete bedrock, so it's in pretty good shape. And so this is about the spillway gates and additional power supply, so they're dependable after an earthquake to continue to move water downstream. So next slide. So this is just a better schematic of the hoist system and the spillway gates, additional power supply, including diesel, so it's dependable. All these projects, by the way, start around John Hart Dam will be first around 2023. This one in Strathcona around 2024, and they should all be completed around 2028. And that's assuming we get regulatory and funding approvals over the next few years through 2023 or so. Next slide. So this is Strathcona Dam, and as I mentioned, it's the largest dam. It's 53 meters tall, half a kilometer long. We have an intake tower that delivers water down to the powerhouse downstream, and of course Upper Campbell Reservoir, Buttle Lake behind it. Next slide. This is looking downstream, just a nice view looking down with the spillway gates on the right there. The spillway gates are quite high up in the reservoir, and they're meant for flood risk management operations. They're not meant to draw down the reservoir, given how high up they are in the reservoir. And the intake on the left that goes down to the powerhouse is for power generation, and in the event of an earthquake, that would actually be closed off. So the issue is how do we lower the reservoir and ease pressure in the dam after a major earthquake? So next slide. So what we're looking here is to put an excavated channel on the right bank of the dam, just to the right of the spillway gates, and they'll show a schematic on the next slide. So it just allows us to go deep into the reservoir and be able to lower the reservoir post-earthquake. So that's why we want to be able to pass water downstream here, John Hart, through to the Campbell River, into the ocean, trying to maintain and staying within the riverbanks all the way along. So that would take process. That allows us inspections and all those kinds of things. So next slide. So this is a schematic. It's a deep excavated channel that goes down. We're going to move the spillway gates. There's 3 spillway gates, as you saw. That area will be replaced with 2 spillway gates within the excavated channel. And the spillway gates that are there now, there'll be a concrete plug that we placed quite high up in the reservoir. And so if the reservoir does come up, it'll just free spill over that concrete plug. And so that way the spillway gates will be part of the new system. It'll also give us better water management resources. At times when we're doing maintenance to the 2 generators and the reservoir is low, it's a bit of a challenge to maintain flows downstream. Sometimes we have to increase the lower Campbell Reservoir level a bit to surcharge it in advance. So those kind of things will go away, give us better water management abilities in lower water years. But of course, the main driver here is dam safety. Now, there's a couple of things. The road across the dam here will be closed for about 3 years, starting around 2024. There is, in the green there, a realigned road. So there's just to the right of the spillway channel, just to the top right of the screen there, there's a recreational sites and trails BC campground. It's not too well used, but certainly in the summertime it is. And so during construction and post access to that site, and the campground itself downstream will be used as a laydown area. And as well as with the proximity of the dam, because of a major earthquake, we've decided to permanently close it. So next slide. Just as an aside, we actually just posted these videos online today at the majorprojects.ca website, which is a partnership with the Campbell River and District Chamber of Commerce. BC Hydro has a project page as well. So these short videos provide good panoramic views and overviews of the planned projects. So just as an aside, if you have some time, you want to maybe check those out. Next slide. So the campground was built mid-1990s. We get about 30,000 people per year. It's free camping, maximum 2-week stay. There's 11 formal campsites and an overflow camping just to the left there. So it's very well used, and this is going to be closed. We actually had a news story. Some of you may have seen it in the Mirror on the radio. It was released, I think, yesterday. So this is going to permanently close on November 30th. And we're looking to relocate it just upstream of the dam. So next slide. So we actually, there's a number of unauthorized campsites created in the watershed that Mosaic now and BC Hydro, we closed off, and one of them was called Little America. Some of you would be familiar with that. And so it was a risk to us, but having said that, we understand why they went there, because it's just a fantastic location, views up the watershed. And so this is where, we looked at different alternatives and we landed on this one. And so go to the next slide. So we communicated to the public around 2018 that we were going to move it. So won't get into too much detail here, but basically looked at different alternatives, did some feasibility studies, confirmed the sites. We do have a liaison committee in Campbell River with the regional districts part of, like Brenda Lee and a number of the city councillors and staff. So there's a fair amount of knowledge in some of this. But the bottom line is we developed a long-term agreement with Mosaic. They own part of the land on the campsite, and we appreciate that in terms of allowing us to build and operate the campground in the exact same way as we do the existing one. So, so we look to have it open hopefully around the end of December. It looks great. We'll go to the next slide. So this is top right is the dam. You can see it in the top there of that insert picture. The campground just below it, and then we've moved it to the Little America site, which is just above the Timber West trestle that goes across the reservoir, and it's close to Highway 28. Next slide. And this is the views, and the campground is located in the bottom of the picture here. As you can see, the watershed above and Strathcona. To allow people with small boats to put car-top boats into the reservoir. It goes down to a certain elevation, basically 217 meters and above, the summer recreation target. So we put, it's not a concrete or like that, it's just informal. And it's 4x4 only, but the point is it's access into the reservoir up here is challenging, so that will help with that. Next slide. So this is a bit of a layout coming in. There's basically a couple of dozen campsites. The formal site had 11. This one has a couple of dozen. There's also some overflow camping. And it's really a nice layout in terms of flow. Pretty large campsites that I think people will be really impressed with. There's not just one or two favorite sites. There's probably 8 or 9 really nice campsites. Of course, all of them look good, but next slide. So it's just a view over the past couple of weeks of some of the sites being created. Next slide. This was a direct award to First Nations with Upland and a few other contractors doing this work on our behalf. Next slide. Kind of the crush. This is one of the campsite locations. Next slide. And this is another one. So there's a bit of planting and other things to take place, but we're really happy with the final result, and I think the public will too. Next slide. So just very briefly on operations, this is the graph for water inflows into the system, and over since the 1960s, I believe, and this is kind of inflows to date. So we've actually had a dry October, November to start, but it's been drier than normal. Next slide. And this is the last 2 years. You can see the normal and minimum maximums in the red there. Then we have the blue and so interesting enough, and early in the year we had some storm activity, and then we've actually had 5 very dry springs, or drier than normal springs, 5 years in a row. And you can see how the flows were down a bit. This year was better off. It was a little bit on the drier side. But we had some more water flows than we did the previous year, which was that blue line. And the total inflows this is all the historical water releases downstream in the gray tones there. So since 1984. Next slide. So we have flow targets in the river, and we have flow targets in the reservoir. And the top graph is Upper Campbell Reservoir, and the lower graph is McIver Lake, Lower Campbell Reservoir. So ideally, in a perfect world, the river flow and the reservoirs are within the dotted lines, the preferred zone. But like anything, if things get a little off kilter in the river and the reservoir, we take corrective measures to lower the river flow, increase the river flow, and those kind of things, so we can stay in that preferred zone. So overall, the past year was quite good, certainly from a recreation level as well, within those systems, and the reservoirs roughly where it should be for this time of year. Of course, we're ready for storm season and flood risk management operations, so we'll see what provides this fall. Next slide. So that concludes my presentation, and I'd be happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Stephen. Is there any questions?
Yes, it's Director Lee.
Go ahead, Director Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Stephen. I just wondered, is when Mosaic is managing those campsites, are people doing advanced bookings with them, and is there a charge?
Yeah, so thanks, Director Lee. The campsite is going to be managed the exact same way as the existing Strathcona Dam campground. So by that I mean it's all being run by BC Hydro.
Okay.
Mosaic has no role in terms of the operations, maintenance, or the construction of it. That's all being done by BC Hydro. They're kind of a silent partner. To get to that, so we'll have a contractor, as we do now, that maintains the sites and makes sure that people follow the rules. So generally speaking, it's 2 weeks max stay, first come, first serve. There's no reservation system where you can book.
Okay.
The camping is free.
Okay.
So just a benefit for the public in terms of appreciating our operations in the area. So it's free. And so yeah, there's certain site rules that we don't want to get into, but that's the kind of the high level.
Perfect. Thank you.
Gentlemen, any other questions? Director Davis.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. My question is, and sorry, I was cutting in and out a bit, so I might have missed it. I'm just wondering what's the overall status of the seismic upgrade of the dams themselves and potential risks going forward.
Yeah, thanks, Director Davis. I think that's why we're doing these projects. Each project is in the hundreds of millions of dollars, and so right now, these facilities are, in terms of BC Hydro, the John Hart Dam and the Strathcona Dam are our highest seismic risk in terms of dam safety. So that's why we're doing these projects. So we're looking to get approvals to begin them starting in 2023. And then all 3 of them will essentially be complete around 2028, assuming everything goes as we hope. And so at that time, the seismic risk goes down dramatically. There's always some risk with dams. So yeah, we have things in place so that for now, that, as I mentioned, you may not have heard it, the interim risk is if there is a major earthquake, and it has to be a real major earthquake, like it has to knock you down and building damage and so forth, that's the risk where people need to move out of the downstream evacuation area. So, I think the regional district and the city have done a pretty good job, and it's an ongoing thing to communicate that risk until these dams are upgraded. And after that, yes, our expectation is the dams would withstand a severe earthquake.
Thanks for that.
Are there any other questions? Seeing none, I'd just like to say thank you, Stephen, for coming. And it's funny, for a few weeks I was driving home on Highway 28 to Gold River. I'm thinking, what are they doing there? Now I know.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of people are wondering about that. Yeah. Well, thank you very much, everyone. Enjoy your day.
Thank you.
Move receipt of Mr. Watson's report.
You can second her. Second by Director Adams. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, call carried. Can I adopt the minutes for the inaugural meeting on November 4th? Director Wally. Second by
Second, Director
Director
Lee.
Lee. Any errors, omissions? Seeing none. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, call carried. Any business rising from the minutes? Seeing none, there's no public considerations, no motions. Excuse me. Chair's report. The only thing I want to mention today, directors, is I did send an email out to everyone regarding appointments. And over the next week or 10 days, I'll contact each and every one of you and we'll discuss the appointments for 2021. And that's all I've got for chair's report at this time. Motion to receive my verbal.
Receipt. Second.
To Director Evans, Director Kerr. Anyone opposed? See none, carried. No consent calendar. Under committee reports, Electoral Area Service Committee. Motion to receive committee reports for November 4th. Director Wally. Seconder.
Second.
Director Lee. Any errors, omissions? No discussion? Call question. Anyone opposed? See none, carried. Item 2, Strathcona Guards Commission for.
Move receipt.
Thank you, Director Adams. Second by Director Lee. Any discussion? See none, anyone opposed? See none, carried. External reports. On the staff report, number 1, COVID-19 Safe Discharge Grant. Motion to receive the CO report. Director Kerr, seconder.
Second, Director Lee.
Thank you. Staff, CEO.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So as I alluded to a couple weeks ago, we had just got some notification that the province was handing out money to regional districts and municipalities for COVID restart programs to make up for facilities and income where we have suffered during COVID, not receiving the income to operate our facilities and having shortfalls within that. So we have before you that program, and we are recommending that staff can look into the details of that program and come back with a report and suggestions on where might that money be best suited to land.
Okay, I have questions. Director Abram.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Slightly sidelined this report, but just 15-20 minutes ago, Premier Horgan was on TV making 2 announcements that affect us. An island health request for a 14-day quarantine for all travelers to Vancouver Island. That was number 1. How they are going to roll that out, I have no idea, but that's what he was announcing. And secondly, that all non-essential travel in BC has now been stopped, not just in the Fraser and Vancouver Island, Lower Mainland areas, but all non-essential travel in BC, he's asking it be curtailed. So I just wanted to mention those 2 things. Seemed like a good place to do it under a COVID-19 report.
Okay, thank you.
Everybody could take note of it.
Any more discussion on the report from the CEO?
Chair, if we could just have staff check and confirm and maybe circulate that information that Director Abrams just shared.
Yes, thank you.
Will do. Yep.
Director Mogul.
thanks. I think that would be a good idea because as reported in the media just now, they're looking into the possibility of a 14-day quarantine on Vancouver Island. It hasn't been announced or implemented. They're going to look into it.
Great. Thank you, Director McGough.
If I may, Mr. Chair, sorry I didn't get a chance to type it in, but I'm only reporting exactly what the Premier said. I wrote it down word for word from what he announced on all networks that he was on at whatever it was, 12 o'clock.
Okay, thank you. Anything else on received report? Seeing none, anyone opposed? Seeing none, on to B. Is the report being prepared for the board's consideration? Motion.
You're muted, Brad.
Sorry.
Number 8.
Sorry, guys. So item B was.
So thanks, Brad. While you were muted, are we on adjournment of the meeting now? Just kidding.
Okay, so B has been moved, seconded, and carried. Item 2, proposed policy, abandoned bylaws. Motion received the report.
We received.
Thank you. Second. Director Anderson, thank you. CEO.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Tom will speak to this.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the board directed that a policy be prepared to deal with this issue, which is more of a direction for and guidance for the staff to bring back bylaws which have been sitting in some cases for many, many years without resolution. And so the policy really is providing some parameters around how that will happen, and essentially we'll come back at least once a year with bylaws that need to be addressed in one fashion or another by the board to be dispensed with. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Discussion, I have Director Abram.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I have no problem if the policy is solely to formalize the review of the bylaws that are, say, on the list, are on record to see what we are doing or should be doing with them. I think this is a great idea. In the list that is provided in the staff report, many of those bylaws have already had money set aside in the work plan over the years to complete them. So I'd like you to have a look at for a future report, how has that money been dealt with when it gets set aside for a specific, say, an OCP review or an area bylaw or complete rezoning bylaw review, et cetera. What happens to it? Next, many of the listed items are needed by the areas represented and have been in the work plan year after year. But we have experienced difficulties in the realm of available staff, and I would suggest that some of these have not proceeded due to those unforeseen vacancies. That should not mean that they are not that they are taken off the list. If anything, they should be put at the top of the list for when we have a full staff complement. The need for the bylaws is still there. It's now more so, as far as I'm concerned anyway, than ever. Many of our OCPs and our zoning bylaws have outlived their useful life way past what municipal affairs advises, as far as 5 to 10 year lifespans, and they need to be looked at and taken through the proper process. So if this policy will help facilitate that, then I'm all for it. I'd also like to ask that in this report that may come back to us, that we would like to know how we split the voting for the administration of these bylaws and what we're going to do with them. And my example would be like if a bylaw for an OCP in a specific electoral area comes up for discussion, would it be an EA discussion? Would it be a full board discussion? And I think we need to know that, you know, on a per item basis, if you could just run down them and say EA full board, whatever.
Yeah, I think
So
that's
when we get to it, I'll make that motion official.
okay. All right. Anything else on discussion on receipt?
Yes, Mr. Chair, it's Director Lee.
Go ahead.
You know, some of these bylaws have been in the waiting for quite a while, and the populations change all the time. New people move in, people die, move out, whatever. I don't think we can rely on bylaws that were drafted, you know, 10 years ago or 5 years ago to be applicable to the area that exists now. So the only reason I can see for bringing these forward is to defeat them and start over.
Okay,
for most of them. And I'm not really in favor of doing that. I think that, you know, we have to work with our planning staff to get enough people to work on these and decide who's going to work on them. Maybe we bring in contractors if our staff are unable to do the work. But certainly what I think might be applicable to Area D for our OCP bylaw and zoning bylaw, start over again, bring in contractors.
Okay, thank you.
So, Mr. Chairman, if I could just briefly to clarify, the intent here, as far as I'm concerned, is to have a formal process to actually bring these back to the board. It's not going to change the voting entitlements for any of these bylaws. It's to provide context as to what's there sitting on the shelf, what is the board's pleasure in terms of defeating them, bringing them back for further action, or any other option that the board might wish to consider. It's not really to override any process related to legitimizing the voting on any of these.
Okay, thank you. I see nothing else. Call question on receipt. Anyone opposed? See none, call carried. And move the policy CPO 28, processing of pending bylaws, be approved. Moved by Director Anderson.
I'd like to
Director
speak.
Wally.
In discussion, Mr. Chair, I'd like to
Go ahead.
make a comment.
Go ahead, Director Abel.
Sorry, I didn't have time to type it in, sorry. So, as I said, you know, depending on the intent, et cetera, which has been somewhat explained, I think it would probably be a good idea if we deferred this until we have a fuller report as to how this will be done, what kinds of implications there will be. Director Lee brought up some things like consultants. So if we could, I'd move deferral until all questions have been considered and answered by staff.
Second.
Second by Director Lee. Okay, no more discussion on deferred motion. Director Anderson.
Thank you. I'm not aware of outstanding questions or issues that are made particularly clear today that staff could reasonably answer. I'm quite happy with what I see in front of us, so I'm just wondering about the appropriateness of this. I would vote against it unless somebody could speak to it more clearly.
Cool. Anything to add, CEO?
Well, I would concur with Director Anderson. I'm not aware of questions or, you know, I don't know about the issue about consultants, what that has to do with abandoned bylaw policy, but I'm not sure about the questions myself, so I don't know.
Okay, thank you.
If I
Any other
could,
questions?
Mr. Chair,
Director Averill.
as mover of the deferral, I would just say that, the main question that would come up in my mind would be the voting structure for the board to deal with each one of these as they came back to us each year. How would that voting structure be structured? To be repetitive in my wording.
Okay, well, if
Mr.
I heard, yeah, if I was gonna say, go ahead, Tom. If I heard Tom correctly, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So any bylaws that were brought to the board under this policy would not have any of the voting entitlements changed from what would normally be the case. So if it's a zoning bylaw that happens to be languishing for 6 or 7 years and is brought back for the board to consider as to what they wish to do, the voting entitlements will be no different than had that bylaw been, away for 1 month. It doesn't change any of that.
Okay, thank you. Thanks
That
for
would just
clarification.
that would be the electoral area zone.
Go ahead, Director Averill.
Yeah, so that would be the electoral areas only. This is why I was asking for clarification, because that isn't clear in the report that we're now receiving.
Tom, do you have a comment?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. So zoning bylaws are voted on by the electoral areas only. The only ones who are entitled to vote on zoning bylaws. That will not change under this policy.
Thank you. Director Moglove.
No, I'm good, thanks.
Thank you. Director Adams.
Thank you. I will oppose deferral. We're already trying to address abandoned bylaws that just haven't got done. I think we just need to move forward.
Thank you. Director Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just like to clarify one thing for the board. I think that this report is mischaracterized the bylaws by referring to them as abandoned. I know that in Area D, there were issues, OCP amendments and whatnot that have taken place, many of them since the main OCP consultations took place. We didn't pass the whole bylaw, but we did a number of amendments to the OCP relating to cannabis, relating to other issues that came up, and that OCP is a live document, has never been abandoned, will never be abandoned. It is being updated all the time. So what's going to happen is if the old OCP comes back again, you'll find that a lot of the issues in that OCP have already been addressed and the bylaws have been changed. So I quite object to the idea that's being perpetrated by the title of this report that the electoral areas have abandoned bylaws. We have not. We continue to work with our communities on how they want their community to move forward, and we've made changes. So okay. It's not so black and white as it is being portrayed.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, this is just an attempt for staff to do some housekeeping with a policy in terms of bylaws. If nobody wants it, we can throw it away. We're not trying to perpetrate anything. We're just trying to clean up some administrative bylaws that have hung around for 10 years.
Thank you, Theo. I don't see any questions, so on deferral, Director Anderson?
No, I was just saying we were getting quite carried away on discussion on deferral.
Okay. So a question on deferral. Anyone opposed? Director Moglove? Opposed? Director Anderson opposed. Director Adams opposed. Director Davis opposed. Director Evans opposed. Director Kerr's opposed. Chair's opposed.
That would seem to be defeated then, Mr. Chair.
Okay, motion defeated. So question on B, policy C, P028 be approved. Anyone opposed?
Director Lee,
Go. No one else? It's called carried. Item 3, curbside refuse collection contracts. Motion to receive the report. Director Evans, second. Director Wally, CEO.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Will Fang will speak to this for us.
Yeah, good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Chair. The regional district operates services to collect residential refuse on both Cortez Island and Sabre Valley. These contracts with the service provider will end November with Margaret in Cortez and December with Waste Management Services. We're looking at, for the interest of transparency, we're looking at starting developing terms of references or invitation to tender to actually get pricing from the market and to look at the best options to continue operating these services. And we're recommending the board to extend the contracts with both with Margaret Versher and Waste Management for the next 3 months. And we're hoping to have a complete analysis and a recommendation by the end of February 2021. Does anyone have any questions?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Director Abram.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Wolfgang. I am just curious, why do we have curbside refuse collection contracts under the Strathcona Regional District when this seems to me, anyway, to be a waste management issue, that most of our waste management issues fall under the Comox Valley banner, and we deal with them there. Why is this one? Why are these being dealt with here? And I have no objection to it. I'm just wondering.
Thank you, Director Abram. I think there is a little bit of history behind this, and I apologize. I cannot respond. Perhaps somebody else can help me with this at this time.
CEO.
I again will defer to Mr. Yates if he knows, but I know this was a long-standing agreement that pre-existed before mine time, and I don't know the impetus of why the collection on Cortez and Sayward was there. I wasn't part of that discussion, so I can't help you out there either.
Mr. Chairman, if it's helpful, I do believe there were a number of local solid waste services that were in place prior to the Comox Strathcona board adopting the regional solid waste plan. As a consequence, when they did that, I believe there were certain carve-outs that were made at the time. Since that point in time, I really can't speak to how those have meshed or failed to mesh with the regional planning for solid waste, but I do believe that's a bit of the background for why these services exist.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Director Anderson.
Just simply at the highest level, these are long-standing services, and the joint solid waste board, as far as I know, really doesn't do collection. That's left to the municipalities for the most part, or in these cases, long-standing, the regional district has stepped in where there isn't a municipal government to do curbside. This has been the case for a long time.
Okay, thank you, Director Anderson. Director Abram.
Okay, yes, I understand it has been long-standing, and under the municipalities agreements, those are definitely municipal agreements, but the regional district electoral areas have always been through the solid waste function, as I understand it and remember it. The only question, the only reason I'm asking the question is if they were part of the Comox Valley Regional District solid waste function, would we not possibly have economies of scale or availability of grants or, whatever. Has it been considered to look at that or to speak with the people at the Comox Valley to find out what the if there are other options, what they might look like, and maybe they'd be better. That's all. Just because we've done it in the past, historically, before we divided regional districts, doesn't necessarily mean we have to continue doing it that way. That's all I'm getting at.
Thank you. Any other comments? Seeing none, I'll call question on receipt. Anyone opposed? Call that carried. Item B is the existing contracts for curbside be extended for additional 3 months. Moved by Director Wally. Second by
Director Lee.
Director Lee. Any further discussion? Call question. Anyone opposed? See none, call carried. On the bylaws, bylaw 401 Quadron Community Hall lease. Motion to receive the report. Director Abrams, second by
Director Lee.
Director Lee, CEO.
Nothing to add, Mr. Chair.
Cool. Any discussion? Seeing none, call question. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, call carried. Item B, move bylaw 401.
So moved.
Director Abram, second by Director Lee. Any further discussion? Call question. Anyone opposed? See none, call carried. Item 2, bylaw 411, most receive. Director Wally. Seconder.
Second.
Director Abram, CEO.
Nothing to add, Mr. Chair.
Any questions? Director Anderson.
We've had previous discussion at the board about this and at EASC, and I just want to register on the record verbally that this does not have my support, and I would actually really implore my other, I believe this is just rural area directors, pastor seat, to change your tune on this one. I think one of our colleagues said this isn't like double dipping, it is double dipping. We've never done this before, getting paid for 2 public hearings that happen simultaneously. There is no more reading, there is no more meetings, there is no more work, there is no more time. It just does not seem right. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Anderson. Director Wally.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I appreciate Director Anderson's position on that, and I'm sure that she realizes that she has no obligation to receive any extra remuneration and is free to not receive that as she wishes. And I respect her choice in that, and I'm sure she respects our choice to the contrary.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? On receipt, question? Anyone opposed? Director Adams is opposed. Receipt? See no more, call carried. Item B, move B from Director Wally. Second. Director Lee. All area directors only. A question, anyone opposed? Director Anderson. Call carried. Item C. Moved by Director Wally. Second by Director Lee. Any other discussion? See none. Question. Anyone opposed? Director Anderson opposed. Call that carried. Item D, the 411B. Director Wally.
Second.
Director Lee. No more discussion. Call question. Anyone opposed? Director Anderson's opposed. Call carried. Item 3, bylaw 412413, OCP and rezoning CP1C20, RZ3C20 alias. Motion to receive
So
report.
moved.
Director
Abrams,
second by Director Evans. CO.
Nothing to add, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Any discussion? See none. Question? Anyone opposed? See none. Call carried. Item B, move bylaw 412 be amended to Quad Island.
Second.
Joe, Director Abram, Director Wally, or sorry, Director Abram, Director Lee. No discussion. Call question. Anyone opposed? Call carried. Item C, bylaw 413 be a bylaw.
so moved.
Director Abram,
Second.
Director Lee. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, carried. And item D.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, carried. Item 4, bylaw 415, Seward Valley Recreation Community Use. Moved by Director Wally. Second by
Second.
Lee. Anything to add, CO?
Nothing to add, Mr. Chair.
Cool. Any questions? Seeing none. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, call carried. How come we got item C and no item B? Must be item B, bylaw 415. Being a bylaw be amended. Moved by Director Wally. Seconder.
Second.
Lee. Harry.
4B.
This is for all directors. Any question? Seeing none. Opposed? Seeing none, carried. Item D, item C, if the rules be suspended. Director Wally. Second by
Lee.
Director Lee. Any discussion? Question? Anyone opposed? Seeing none, carried. And item C, bylaw 415 be returned. Director Wally. Director
That's
Lee.
D, second.
It's actually C now.
Oh, is it? Okay.
I call question. Anyone opposed? See none, call carried. Number 5, bylaw 417, human resources policy. Motion to receive the report, CO.
So moved.
Director Lee, I need a seconder.
Everybody else has to wake up. I can't be the only one.
Director Wally, thank you. Anything to add, CEO?
Nothing to add, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Any questions? See none, anyone opposed? Carried. Item B, the bylaw 417 being bylaw to delegate authority. Director Wally. Director Adams, second. No discussion? Anyone opposed? Seeing none, carried. Item C, rules be suspended for 417. Director Wally. Director Moglove. No questions? I'll call question. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, carried. And item D, the bylaw 417. Director Moglove. Director Evans. Any questions? Seeing none, anyone opposed? Seeing none, carried. Item 6, bylaw 418, Surgeon Narrows Wharf License Agreement. Motion to receive the report. Director Abrams, seconder. Director Moglove. Anything to add, CEO?
Nothing to add, Mr. Chair.
Any questions? Seeing none, I'll call question. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, carried. Item B, the bylaw 418B, bylaw to authorize.
So moved.
Director Davis.
So moved.
Director Moglove. No further questions? All in favor or anyone opposed? Carried. Item C, the rule suspended for bylaw 418 be second and third reading.
So moved.
Director Evans, Director Adams. Anyone opposed? See none, carried. And item D, the bylaw 418 be returned.
So moved.
Director Abram, second by Director Kerr. Anyone opposed? Carried. Correspondence. Motion to receive correspondence. Motion by Director Lee, receive all, second by Director Adams.
I'd like to have item
One,
2 and 5 pulled.
and one, please.
And one. Okay. So we'll item 1 first then. Most received indigenous housing barriers. Moved by Director Anderson, second. Or actually, we received them all. Director Anderson.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know a whole lot more about this than other board members do, but there's a meeting request, and this is a very important issue as far as I understand, both from my involvement on the board and previously on the health network. So I would just hope that we'd be able to respond to this meeting request. I don't much have a preference of who goes, but I would imagine, probably Brenda Lee being adjacent there, and perhaps a member from Campbell River, perhaps an electoral area director. I'm happy for it to mostly be staff, but I would like to see this responded to. So if after there's discussion, I'd happily make a motion, but happy to receive people's thoughts. Thanks.
Thank you. Director McGlove.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The city received a similar letter, and we are, I believe, trying to arrange a meeting to discuss the issue, even though it's a bit late in the day. I'm wondering, I'm not sure, or maybe his Director Adams can help, whether it would be possible to sort of link in with the meeting that we're trying to set up, because there's not a lot of time available for this.
Thank you.
Chair, if I could weigh in, I believe the intent is that it would be one meeting. There's considering the limited time and the urban indigenous housing grant is for this year. I can't believe they're coming this late in the year to try to schedule the meeting to meet the grant requirements, but it is what it is. But it's going to be really, really challenging to fit a date in between now and the Christmas break with everyone's schedules. And that's why I think if we could just have one big meeting, that's the city, the SRD, and all of the agencies from Indigenous Housing and Wellness Coalition, and do it all in one shot.
Thank you, Director Adams. I'm going to go CO. Your thought?
Yeah, I'm open. I mean, it's a request for that we attend a meeting, and if it's the board's desire that you appoint staff, elected officials, a resolution to that end would be appreciated.
Okay, thank you. Director Lee?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Considering the shortage of time and considering that Area D is not an urban area, we are a rural area, and we don't have, as far as I can see, visible homeless in Area D. Maybe way out in the bush somewhere. I don't know. I haven't seen anything. So I think it's more of a downtown issue, and given the shortage of time, I would think that the city of Campbell River is best positioned to respond to this issue themselves, since they have the issue right in their downtown.
Okay, thank you.
Chair, if I can just speak to that, and certainly respect the comments of Director Lee, but this is not related to housing. This is related to urban and indigenous, or to homeless, I should say. This is related to housing. And whether it be Quadra or Cortez or Gold River or Tassus or Sayward or Area D. Every one of our communities has lower end alternatives for housing, whether they're campgrounds or trailer parks or mobile homes or whatever. And I think it's looking at the entire broad spectrum. This isn't a conversation about homeless, it's about housing barriers.
Thank you. Director Anderson.
After receipt, I'd happily make a motion. I would be more than happy to attend such a meeting. Thank you, Andy, for the clarification. That's really important. I also know that we had somebody, I believe, in the planning department a while ago working with the health network on potentially looking at some kind of housing service a few years ago. I know Libby and maybe Onico and others were working on that. So I'm just wondering if there's anybody within staff who might be dialed into this a little bit and could offer some support from a staff perspective.
Certainly, Anico could.
Thank you, through the chair, to Director Anderson. I am not fully familiar with the project, but certainly we do have staff working with the Urban Indigenous Housing Coalition with respect to housing options in the area, including the islands. Libby has been heavily involved in this process, as well as Erica. Erica did offer most recently to provide a brief presentation to the board with respect to this at the board's convenience. Unfortunately, we didn't make it to this meeting, but certainly staff is well dialed in to this initiative, and if we are able to set up a meeting, we would be able to provide additional support.
Thank you. Okay, Director Abram, is this on receipt?
No, this would be a subsequent motion.
Okay, well, okay, thank you. Is there anything else on receipt? Seeing none, anyone opposed? Seeing none, carried. And Director Anderson, you had mentioned a motion.
Sure, just typing in here that staff and any interested SRD directors be delegated to meet with is it the coalition?
Yep.
So, and I think that if we could piggyback on the meeting that Campbell is setting up, that'd be absolutely a no-brainer. So if you want to embed that in the motion, I can do that.
That's fine. I think that's good enough.
Okay.
Do we have a second on the motion? Director Davis. Director Abram.
Yes, I'd just like to suggest that this should be a member of staff, as has been mentioned by Onico. They have been deeply involved in it, and I think that the SRD interests could be well presented by them, especially with their background in the initiative. And it should just be staff, not directors, that go to this meeting.
Okay,
And
thank you.
I'm more than happy to support staff attendance at the meeting, and so move if necessary.
Yeah, well, I think in Director Anderson's, it does say the staff and in the interested. So if we decide staff goes. Any other questions on the motion? Seeing none, call question. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, call carried. Item 2, Golden Harbor View Development. Motion, we received it. And Director Abram?
Second.
Any discussion? Director Abram?
He's muted.
I somehow tapped it. Sorry.
Okay, go ahead, Director Abram.
I'd like to ask staff to speak to the comment in the letter that states, quote, as this is a staff amendment update, this could be moved and accepted with a recommendation to proceed to the public hearing stage. I find it very strange that a consultant for an applicant is telling the board and staff how they should conduct their business. And I'd like to know what staff has to say about that particular phrase.
Well, Mr. Chair, if I may, this is correspondence. We don't encourage it, we don't support it, we don't solicit it, we don't write it. So we can't take ownership or responsibility for the things that are said or the questions made in there, the statement. So I find it difficult to respond to a unsolicited statement by this individual. So I don't know where he gets it. So it's just correspondence for the board to receive. Staff have nothing to do with it.
Thank you.
Well, I totally appreciate that. If the point was that this is a public document now, and it looks like the applicant and his consultant are directing staff and the board on how to move forward on the action, not that it's just suggestion, but more that it's a direction. I, highly object to that.
Okay, thank you. Director Lee?
Yes, I would like to make a motion to defer this.
It's just correspondence.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think that the correspondence should be deferred until after all the issues that we're dealing with at Gowland are dealt with.
No, we're not going to defer it. This is just correspondence we're receiving.
Yeah.
Thank you. We'll move on. Number 5, Butte Inlet IPP project.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, I don't believe you called the question on receipt of that correspondence.
Sorry. Question on anyone opposed? Seeing none, call carried. Thank you. Item 5, Butte Inlet IPP project.
Mr. Chair, I'd move receipt of that.
Seconded by Director Davis, and he's got a question. Director Davis.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'm just curious what statements were made regarding the Butte IPP, because I don't recall that. And is there anybody here that can speak to that?
Yes, there is.
Seal.
Sorry, what was the request?
I'm just looking for information on what statements were made that they're ostensibly responding to here regarding Butte Inlet IPPs.
Oh, I think Director Abram, he was in that meeting, so I think it's appropriate for him to respond.
Okay, Director Abram.
Yes, thank you. I definitely wanted to respond to it. First of all, I was quite surprised that the letter did not come to me. I was the only presenter and the only person that was involved with Minister Doug Donaldson and his 2 top staff people, one of them being Jonathan. So the briefing note that was presented to him was a letter that I can provide to you later, Martin, if you like, that was written July 1st, actually, and sent to the Premier and ministers and our minister, Claire Trevena of the day, and a number of others, and the Homolko Band, which was basically opposition to the 17 run-of-the-river programs that were being applied for by a Turkish company to go throughout the Toba, Butte Inlet, Southgate River, Homathko River watersheds that would have basically destroyed the area with road building, power line construction, long linear clear cuts all the way to Powell River, Lund, sorry. And so those were the issues that were in the letter. Like I said, I can provide that to you by email if you like. has a complete history of it, complete history of the NDP opposition to it, and we have NDP in government not making a final decision on stopping this most recent project. That's why I requested the meeting with Doug Donaldson, because he is the final signatory on giving the tenure for the actual land. The Homolko ban to date has been opposed. I'm waiting for a current letter to pass on to Doug Donaldson, but they are quite involved with other issues at their council. They also had an election right in the middle of this, so it was pretty time restricted for them. But anyway, I certainly have been having discussions with my constituents. We have had this at the board before, and whether it was before your time, Martin, I'm not sure. But the is still withstand. It's still there from a very, very large number of people throughout the province.
Okay.
So I would like. Pardon me.
I was just going to suggest maybe send an email to Director Davis and bring him up to date on what you've done.
I will do that for sure.
I appreciate that. Thanks.
The only thing I was concerned about the fact that I was not even copied on this correspondence when I was the only person that presented. It was sent to David Leach as a CAO, which maybe that's the appropriate protocol. I don't know.
Okay. Thank you. Anything else on receipt? Anyone opposed? All carried.
Move receipt of all remaining correspondence.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Director Adams? No further discussion? Anyone opposed? See none, carried. Item P, members' reports, 911 Corp. Most received report?
I have a verbal update I can provide to board members.
Okay, let's move the receipt first. Thank you. Director Moglove?
I'll move it, yep.
And Director Abram is seconded, and go to Director Moglove first.
Thank you. So this issue of the reapportionment or the apportionment of the cost for 911 has been on the table at our meetings for, well, actually before I was even appointed as a representative. I'll preface my remarks by saying that at the last meeting, which was November the 6th, a motion of the board was that there will in fact be a change to how cost is allocated. So it's not a question if there'll be a change, it's what that change will look like. The other thing I will say is that in terms of the cost, just to put this in perspective, currently the cost is about, correct me if I'm wrong, Tom, $3.99 per $100,000 of assessed value in the Strathcona Regional District. So therefore a house worth $300,000, the annual requisition is $12. For a house of $500,000, it's 5 times 4, $20. Whatever change comes in, it will increase that requisitions probably anywhere between $2 to $4 per household, not necessarily. So that's the order of magnitude we're talking about. So at the last meeting on November 12th, we went through the different reports and the different aspects or different ways cost. Let me just back up. The way it works now is that there's a shareholder agreement, and the current allocation of cost is rooted in that shareholders agreement. It's not by legislation. It's not by letters patent. It is the shareholders agreement. There are 6 regional districts that participate. Strathcona Regional District, I believe, has 17% of the shares. Comox Valley has 32% of the shares. Regional District of Nanaimo has 27% of the shares, etc. So it's basically a shareholders agreement. Therefore, the shareholders have the ability to change the cost allocation. So at the meeting on November the 6th, it was the other vote that took place is that options 3, 5, and 7 in the report would go for further analysis and discussion at our next meeting, which I believe is in January. Option 3 is to allocate it based on 50% assessment and 50% population. Option 5 is to base it on call volume for the PSAP and the fire dispatch contract, and on assessment for the infrastructure and administration part of the cost. And option 7 was call volume for the PSAP and fire dispatch, and 50% assessment, 50% population for infrastructure and admin. There was some debate at that meeting about going to call volume alone, and I pushed back against that a lot because, as I understand it, the way it works is that what is registered as a call, whether through PSAP, which is goes through the Ecom Surrey, and or fire dispatch, doesn't necessarily catch all the calls that for our fire dispatch here work on. So for instance, there's something called first responder, no response. So Campbell River, our fire department, they're first responders. Other communities don't have that. And therefore, if a call comes in and that community doesn't do first response, the fire dispatch has to handle the call, but it's not compiled. So I pushed back against this idea of this call volume because I don't think it accurately sets out. In terms of, I think where this originated from was, I guess it would be the regional district in Nanaimo and the Comox Valley Regional District. The cost allocation for them has gone up and up and up because their assessments have gone up proportionately more than the other regional districts. And so currently the cost allocation is based on assessment. So there was a discussion at the November 6th meeting as to why that should or should not continue. I made the argument that most municipal services are based on assessment, and therefore why shouldn't this one also be? On the other hand, the argument was made that there are other municipal services and or regional services that are based on usage. And if you can actually quantify usage, it's not unheard of to base allocation. So that's where it stands. As I say, there's these 3 different options that are moving forward. Each one will involve an increase to the Strathcona Regional District. The one that I was pushing for mostly at the is the one 50% assessment, 50% population, and it would increase the requisition for Strathcona Regional District by about I'm just looking at it, not less than $50,000, and that would entail, I believe it was 40 cents per 100,000, so a $2 increase for a $500,000 house. I am going to be getting more information about the call volume so I can clarify that again at the next meeting, because that was quite the discussion at our last meeting. So I don't think I have anything else to add, and I'm happy to answer any questions if I can.
Okay, thank you. And Director Abram first.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Claire, for the report. I think that, you know, a staff report or a report from you or whatever in writing that tells us the incredible amount of information that you've just given us, if you could, either you or staff at 911 Corporation could lay out the options and the cost implications of each and bring that to us for us to be able to give you some idea of what we think of it as far as, you know, yes, no, whatever to each one. It doesn't sound like it's a huge cost implication according to what you just said, but I just think it would be a good idea if we could have something to say about it.
Thanks, Jim. I appreciate that, but that report is on the agenda. The 2 reports from the staff at North Island 111 are there with all of the different cost implications for 8 different scenarios, and also the history of where it came from and the pros and cons, or not pros and cons, but the arguments sort of in favor, or why you would do it this way or not that way. So that is in the 17 pages of report that is on the agenda. And so it is there. I was just trying to highlight where it's going and give you a sense of the discussion that was at the last meeting.
Okay, my apologies. In looking at the item or the letter, I did not go through what was called item. I'm sorry about that.
Okay, thank you. And Director Lee, you had a question.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I'd like to say I have every confidence in Director Moglove to represent the SRD on this outside body, and it's really tough for the SRD directors to know all the depth of detail that you're working with, that Director Moglove is working with on choosing the best option. I had two questions on, so I would completely support any decisions that Director Moglove is making on our behalf. And I would just like to ask why, first of all, why 911 only services the northern part of Nanaimo? Where does the rest of Nanaimo pay for 911 contributions? That's one question. And my other question is, when you vote on which option you want to choose, is it a weighted vote according to the populations of each of the stakeholders, or how is the vote conducted? Do you have any chance to change the vote or influence it?
Thanks. That's a really good question. My understanding, it is a weighted vote, and each regional district has a number of votes, similar to how. So the city, for instance, the city of Campbell River here at the SRD, two of our directors have more votes than others. So it is a weighted vote. I don't have it in front of me, but clearly it's based on the share percentage in the corporation. So Mount Waddington has 3% of the shares, Strathcona Regional District has 17%, Comox Valley has 32%, Cathet has 8%, Alberta Quaquot has 13%, and RDN has 27%. So I believe the weighted vote is based on the shares. Okay. Dave, if you could maybe correct me if I'm wrong on that, or Tom.
So it would be kind of an academic argument if, Nanaimo and one other, say the Comox Valley, decided they're going to change the formula, we wouldn't have much chance in fighting against that.
Yeah, thank you. And I appreciate that, because it has been difficult. This has been brought on mainly by RD, Regional District Nanaimo, and Comox Valley. And to be fair, when the shareholder agreement was first put together, at the assessments at that time and how the shares were set out, because the assessments in those areas have gone up proportionally more than other regional districts, under the current system, like for instance, Comox Valley is paying 30. So actually, I got the shares wrong. I apologize. The shares, Comox Valley has 29% of the shares, but they pay 32% based on the assessment. RDN has 24% of the shares, but they pay 27%. So that's, I think, what initiated or caused this to come to the board at 911. In terms of your first question, which was, now I forgot.
Why isn't all of Nanaimo in the service? Why is it only North Nanaimo?
I think they get their service through Surrey, I think. I think maybe I don't even know, but they chose not to, and they're not interested in participating. I think did they do their own fire dispatch and then they're moving to Surrey? I don't know.
Yeah, I believe they do their own fire dispatch there. Yeah, right. And they're possibly moving to another provider.
Right. Okay. Oh, thank you. So, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So just one last comment I have is, like, I agree with you as well that they shouldn't be charging based on call volumes, because call volumes are going to vary from year to year and from community to community. and it won't give you any sort of ongoing solid idea of what the contribution should be from year to year. So, but other than that, I wouldn't want to try to direct you from outside of that body, because you know there's so much involved in these outside bodies that go into making decisions, and you have to rely on your representative. And
Right.
sometimes
Thank you.
So that's what I would do. Just rely on my
sit down,
representative.
Thank you very much, Director Lee. I did have an opportunity to sit down with Stephanie Bremer. She's the administrator of the fire dispatch here, just so I could understand how the call volumes work. It's really quite complicated, but she walked me through it, and I'm going to probably sit down with her again just so I understand for our next meeting at 911, so I can present how it may not be an equitable way to go. What the 911 staffing are saying is that it may be appropriate for one aspect of the cost, i.e., but I'm still not convinced of that. So I'll continue to report back as to where we're going, and I'll let you know once I know what's happening.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. McGough. Any other discussion? Okay, now question on received report. Anyone opposed?
Director Unger, you're muted.
How does that happen once in a while? Question's been called. Anyone opposed? See none, carried. We have no management report, nothing under new business. No Denman. So we'll move to closed. Receive report.
Director, this is Norm in Sayward.
Yes.
I missed the thing about changing the recreation center in Sayward, changing the name. And I would just like to say my view of the village of Sayward pays for most of the upkeep of that and the running of it. And I think it should be a public meeting.
So Director Kirshner, the irony of your comment is that a community hall service within the valley of Sayward that historically had a recreation tag to it. So it doesn't actually fund anything. It has nothing to do with recreation. It has nothing to do with the village recreation, and therefore the area director requested that we change the name of the service to better represent what the service provides. So there is no link to Sayward Recreation or any recreation at all.
Point taken.
Thank you. So we moved on to closed session. Report from CEO.
My receipt of the CAO's report.
Seconder, Director Lee. Director Jules. Oh, sorry. Director Adams is seconded. Any discussion? See none. Anyone opposed? See none. Move B or move C. Director Adams, second by Director Lee. Anyone opposed? Carried. Going into closed. See everyone in a few minutes.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
Item U on the agenda, termination of the meeting. I think you would want to do that.
Sorry.
Before you go to the meeting.
Couldn't hear you, Tom.
Mr. Chairman, item U on the agenda to terminate this meeting.
Sorry.
For opening another meeting.
Moved by Director Lee, second by Director Kerr. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, carried. Okay. See everybody in a few minutes.